അതിവിശിഷ്ടയായ അതിഥിയെ സ്വാഗതം ചെയ്യാനും സ്വീകരിക്കുവാനും അവസരം നൽകിയ അല്ലാഹുവെ ഒരിക്കൽ കൂടി വാഴ്ത്തുന്നു. കോഴിക്കോട് നഗരം ഇന്ന് വരവേൽപ്പ് നൽകിയത് ലോകപ്രശസ്തയായ അതിവിശിഷ്ടയായ ഒരു അതിഥിക്കാണ്. യുവാൻ റെഡ്ലി ഒരു പ്രതീകമാണ്. പടിഞ്ഞാറിനേക്കാൾ ഇസ്ലാം പ്രധാനമാകുന്നതിന്റെ, ഭൗതികതയേക്കാൾ മതം ശ്രദ്ധേയമാകുന്നതിന്റെ, ആധുനികതയെ ആത്മീയത അതിജയിക്കുന്നതിന്റെ, പടിഞ്ഞാറിന്റെ ഫാഷൻ ഭ്രമത്തെ പർദ്ദ പുറന്തള്ളുന്നതിന്റെ, സംഘടനത്തെക്കാൾ സംവാദം സഫലമാവുന്നതിന്റെ, വാളിനേക്കാൾ വായന വിജയം നേടുന്നതിന്റെ, സാമ്രാജ്യത്വത്തിന്റെ അകത്തളങ്ങളിൽ പ്രവാചക മതത്തിന്റെ വിപ്ലവ സ്വപ്നങ്ങൾ പൂവണിയുന്നതിന്റെ, സർവോപരി ജാഹിലിയ്യത്തിന്റെ ഘനാന്ധകാരങ്ങളെ ദൈവിക ദീനിന്റെ പ്രകാശ കിരണങ്ങൾ കീറിമുറിക്കുന്നതിന്റെ ഉജ്ജ്വലമായ പ്രതീകമാണ് യുവാൻ റെഡ്ലി. ഇവിടെ വരികയുണ്ടായി. അവർ ഒരു കന്നി മാത്രമാണ്. മുഹമ്മദ് അസദ് മുതൽ റോട്ടുമക്ക എഴുതിയ മുഹമ്മദ് അസദ് മുതൽ ആരംഭിച്ച വിശുദ്ധ ഖുർആന്റെ ആദ്യത്തെ ഇംഗ്ലീഷ് പരിഭാഷ തയ്യാറാക്കിയ മുഹമ്മദ് മാർമഡിയോക്ക് വിത്താളിലൂടെ, റജാഗലോഡിയിലൂടെ, ഷഹീദ് മാർക്കം എക്സിലൂടെ, കാഷ്യസ് ക്ലേയിലൂടെ, കേറ്റ് സ്റ്റീവൻസിലൂടെ, ബ്രാദ് ഓഫ്മാനിലൂടെ, ഇറിക്ക് വിംഗിലൂടെ, ജെഫ്രി ലാങ്കിലൂടെ, ടി വിറിങ്ങിലൂടെ, മാർട്ടിൻ ലെയിൻസിലൂടെ, ഇംഗ്ലി മാച്ചൻസിലൂടെ അവസാനം ഇതാ നമ്മുടെ മുമ്പിൽ നിൽക്കുന്ന യുവാൻ റെഡ്ലിയും എന്നതൊരു പ്രതീകമാണ്. ഒന്നേരമെന്നത് ഇനി കിഴക്കും പടിഞ്ഞാറും പ്രതിധ്വനിക്കുന്നു. ആധുനിക ഇസ്ലാമിക പ്രസ്ഥാനങ്ങൾ അവയുടെ കർമ്മപദത്തിലൂടെ അതിനെ സാക്ഷാത്കരിക്കാനുള്ള ശ്രമത്തിലാണ്. ഇനി ഏതാണ് മുതലാളിത്തത്തിന് നേരെ മുഖാമുഖം നിൽക്കുന്ന ദർശനം എന്ന് ചോദിച്ചാൽ മായങ്കർക്കാത്തൊരു ഭൗതിക ദർശനമില്ല. ഞാൻ ഒരിക്കലും യൂഗോ ഷാവേസിന് മറക്കുകയില്ല. പക്ഷേ യൂഗോ ഷാവേസ് ഇന്ന് പ്രതിദാനം ചെയ്യുന്നത് കാർൽ മാർക്സിന്റെയോ ഫ്രെഡറിക് ഏംഗൽസിന്റെയോ ദർശനങ്ങളല്ല എന്ന വസ്തുത കാണാതിരിക്കാനും പാടില്ല എന്നാണ് ഞാൻ സൂചിപ്പിക്കുന്നത്. തീർച്ചയായും യൂഗോ ഷാവേസും അതുപോലെ കാസ്ട്രോയുടെ ക്യൂബയും നജാദിയുടെ ഇറാനും ഹിസ്ബുള്ളാഹിയുടെ ലെബനോണും ഉൾപ്പെടെ ലോകത്തൊരു പുതിയ സന്ദേശമാണ് നൽകുന്നത്. മർദ്ദകർക്കെതിരെ മർദ്ദിതരുടെ വിമോചനത്തിന്റെ കാഹളമാണ് അവർ മുഴക്കുന്നതെങ്കിൽ അതേ വിമോചന കാഹളവുമായി കേരളത്തിന്റെ മണ്ണിലേക്ക് കടന്നു വന്ന യുവാൻ റെഡ്ലിയും ലോകത്തെങ്ങാനുമുള്ള പോരാട്ട ശക്തികളുടെ ആവേശമായി അവിടെ വികാരമായി അവർക്ക് പ്രചോദനമായി വർത്തിക്കണമെന്ന് ആഗ്രഹിക്കുകയും ചെയ്തു. അല്ല, എനിക്ക് അവസാനമായി പറയാനുള്ള ചോദ്യമാണ്. നമ്മളെ കാലം വിപ്ലവകാരികളെ തരികയാണ്. എവിടെയാണ് ആണുങ്ങളുള്ളത്? പെണ്ണുങ്ങളിതാ ഇവിടെയുണ്ട്. ഇവിടെ മാത്രമല്ല, അമേരിക്കയിലെ ഇസ്ലാമിക് സൊസൈറ്റീസ് ഓഫ് നോർത്ത് അമേരിക്കയുടെ തലപ്പത്ത് ഇംഗ്ലീഷ് മാക്സൺ എന്ന വനിതയുണ്ട്. ഇതേ സഹോദരിയുടെ തന്നെ പ്രതിദാനം ചെയ്യുന്ന റെസ്പെക്ടിന്റെ വൈസ് പ്രസിഡന്റായി സെൽമ യാക്കൂബ് ഉണ്ട്. ഫ്രാൻസിലെ ഇടതുപക്ഷത്തിന്റെ സഹകരണത്തോടുകൂടി തെരഞ്ഞെടുപ്പിൽ തലമറക്കുന്നതിന് നിയമം കൊണ്ടുവരാൻ കാത്തിരിക്കുന്ന ഫ്രാൻസിന് മുഖമക്കനെ ധരിച്ചുകൊണ്ട് അതിനെതിരെ പൊരുതിയ അസ്മ അബ്ദുൽ ഹമീദ് ഉണ്ട്. ഇന്ത്യയിലെ സമരവേദികളിൽ വേണ്ട സഹോദരിമാരുണ്ട്. അതുകൊണ്ട് എവിടെയാണ് ആണുങ്ങളുള്ളത്? ജീവനോടെ കുഴിച്ചു മൂടപ്പെട്ട മാധ്യമ പ്രചാരണങ്ങളുടെ മുമ്പിൽ, മാധ്യമ പ്രചാരണങ്ങൾ കൊണ്ട്, ഭരണകൂട ഭീകരത കൊണ്ട്, സാമ്രാജ്യത്വത്തിന്റെ അടിച്ചമർത്തൽ കൊണ്ട് കുഴിച്ചു മൂടാൻ ശ്രമിക്കുന്ന ഇസ്ലാമിനെ എഴുന്നേറ്റുയർത്തിക്കൊണ്ടുവരാൻ ആരുണ്ട്? ആൺകുട്ടികളെ കുറ്റം ചെയ്യാതെ പാപം ചെയ്യാതെ കുഴിച്ചു മൂടാൻ ശ്രമിക്കുന്ന ഈ ഇസ്ലാമിന്റെ കാവലാളികളായി ലോകത്തെങ്ങാനുമുള്ള ഉയർന്നേറ്റ യുവചേതനയോടൊപ്പം കേരളത്തിലെ യുവചേതനയും അതിന്റെ വിദ്യാർത്ഥി സമൂഹവും അതിന്റെ മാതൃപ്രസ്ഥാനവുമുണ്ട്. ആരുണ്ട് വരാൻ അവരോട് പറയുന്നു. ഇക്ബാലിന്റെ കടമെടുത്തുകൊണ്ട് പറയുന്നു, ഇസ്ലാം ലക്ഷ്യമായി വെച്ചുകൊണ്ട് ഒരു പുതിയ വിപ്ലവം. ആ വിപ്ലവം ആർക്കും എതിരല്ല. അത് മനുഷ്യ സ്നേഹത്തിന് വിപ്ലവമാണ്, ജീവകാരുണ്യത്തിന് വിപ്ലവമാണ്, മർദ്ദിതന്റെ മോചനത്തിന് വിപ്ലവമാണ്, ഈ പ്രകൃതിയുടെ സംരക്ഷണത്തിന് വിപ്ലവമാണ്, അടിച്ചമർക്കപ്പെട്ട ജനതയ്ക്ക് വേണ്ടിയുള്ള വിമോചന സമരത്തിന് വിപ്ലവമാണ്. പാവപ്പെട്ടവന്റെ പേരിൽ സംസാരിച്ച കമ്മ്യൂണിസം പോലും മറകണ്ഠം ചാടുമ്പോൾ പ്രാന്തവൽക്കരിക്കപ്പെട്ട നിസ്സഹായരായ മനുഷ്യന്റെ കൂടെ നിൽക്കുന്ന വിപ്ലവമാണ്. ആ വിപ്ലവത്തെ അണിചേരാൻ മുന്നോട്ട് വരിക. പടിഞ്ഞാറിൽ നിന്ന് നമ്മോടൊപ്പം വന്നു ചേർന്ന ഈ പോരാളിയോടൊപ്പം അവരോടൊപ്പം അതുപോലെ ലോകത്തെങ്ങാനുമുള്ള ധീരരായ ഉജ്ജ്വലരായ വിപ്ലവകാരികളോടൊപ്പം നമുക്കും അണിചേരാം. സർവശക്തനായ അല്ലാഹു അനുഗ്രഹിക്കട്ടെ എന്ന് പ്രാർത്ഥിച്ചുകൊണ്ട് ഈ സമ്മേളനം ദയാമയനായ ദൈവത്തിന്റെ നാമത്തിൽ കരുണാവാരിയായ അല്ലാഹുവിന്റെ നാമത്തിൽ ഉദ്ഘാടനം ചെയ്ത് അറിയിച്ചുകൊള്ളുന്നു. ബിസ്മില്ലാഹിർ റഹ്മാനിർ റഹീം. വആഖിറു ദഅവാനാ അൽഹംദുലില്ലാഹി റബ്ബിൽ ആലമീൻ.
Sisters, friends, assalamu alaikum, welcome. And I notice that our friends from the media are here. I hope we get some factual and accurate reporting from this event. According to Manorama newspaper, my conversion to Islam was forced. Well, let's clear that one up for a start. Nobody is holding a gun to my head. La ilaha Allah Allah Muhammadan Rasulullah. How dare they say that my conversion to Islam was forced? I spent nearly 2 years studying the Holy Quran and supporting Islamic literature. Never at one time during those 2 years was I forced to do anything by any Muslims. In fact, as we know, there's no compulsion in this great religion. Secondly, another newspaper, De Shafi Mani, said I called for a referendum in Kashmir. Absolute lies. Shoddy journalism. I was asked about Kashmir and I said, don't ask me, go and ask the Kashmiris. It has nothing to do with me. In fact, I think there's far too much Western interference in this side of the world. And the last thing you need is another Westerner telling you what to do. So to those two journalists who wrote those scurrilous lies, we expect an apology. And if you're not entirely certain about what I said, we did record the speech, so we can prove what I said. And I would hurry up with that apology because my lawyers are getting very itchy. There are those who portray themselves as cuddly lefties, as socialists, secular socialists, who believe it's fashionable to criticize Muslims and Islam. They dare to wear t-shirts with great revolutionary figures on their t-shirts. And then they go and pick on Muslims and attack Muslims. Those aren't the actions of revolutionary heroes like Che Guevara. They are the actions of cowardly people with no mettle or backbone. And then there are those who are driven by... Sadly, I believe that things will get much, much worse before they get better. So to the non-Muslims who are here tonight, thank you for coming along, showing your solidarity and support. We need our non-Muslim friends like we've never needed them before. And to the Muslims here tonight, remember how much we do need our friends from outside the faith as well. It is vitally important that in these troubled times we make good, solid friendships. Back in Britain, one government minister who just loves to whip up hatred against Muslims is Phil Willis, who is actually a member of Parliament in the constituency of Oldham, where there is a strong Muslim presence. Now you would think that he would show some respect for the people in his area, but he doesn't. He abuses the Muslims. Why? Because they don't get involved in politics, and so they don't count. If you don't vote, you don't count. If you don't take part in politics, if you don't get actively involved, you will be ignored, or even worse, you will be ground down. Phil Willis recently jumped on the bandwagon in the wake of the Archbishop of Canterbury's headlines, and he created hateful headlines about Muslims inbreeding, with his comments about the health risks of cousin marriages among the Pakistani community. The way he spoke about the issue, you'd think that Frankenstein-like babies were being born in every maternity ward around Oldham. Perhaps Phil Willis would have been better employed going to speak to the Queen, because there's plenty of cousins marrying cousins in the European royal families. And it's also worth noting that it is not illegal in Britain to marry your first cousin. It's not against the law. So what was he trying to do? The problem was he was trying to whip up more hate against the Muslim community, and he doesn't care how he does it. He talked about this problem as being an elephant in the living room that no one wants to talk about. Well, the real elephant in the British government's living room is the Islamophobia which is rife in government and establishment circles. And I see it across Europe. And sadly, I've seen it in some elements of the media over here. I've only been here a few days, and the hospitality has been overwhelming. But there are those elements of the media sitting there smouldering, creating poisonous stories that are simply not true. I would like to remind politicians across the world that every time they open their mouths and say something nasty about Islam or Muslims, a sister somewhere gets assaulted, either verbally or physically, by some racist thug. And if you want statistics, you just have to go to the Islamic Human Rights Commission website, where they have been counting the numbers of attacks on the Muslim communities. And the attacks increase every time there are hateful headlines. Christians of any sect would be reeling if they were pilloried for their practices and traditions. Can you imagine what would be said about Muslims if in any of our services, like in the Christian service, we drank the blood of Christ? And so tonight, please support the students' Islamic organizations. These youngsters, the youth from the SIO, are being targeted, are being persecuted for nothing more than highlighting injustices. We have to come together and stand shoulder to shoulder against these bullies and thugs, otherwise the day of the tyrant will come into India. and you have enough tyrants surrounding India already. Finally, I just want to quote that great Muslim martyr, Malcolm X. He said, "Sitting at the table doesn't make you a diner unless you eat some of what's on the plate. Being here in America does not make you an American. Being born here in America does not make you an American. Now substitute America for India. Back home we'll substitute it for Britain." We have to get at the table, and we don't want crumbs either. We want to be treated like equals. And my final message: the drums of war are already beating now towards another Muslim country, Iran. We've seen Iraq devastated. We've seen Afghanistan devastated. We saw what happened in Lebanon, although the Hezbollah taught the Zionist army a lesson they'll never forget. But the drums of war are beating now towards Iran. And who is standing shoulder to shoulder with Ahmadinejad? Any of the Arab leaders? No solidarity there. The solidarity is coming from across the continent of revolutionary heroes. Hugo Chavez is standing shoulder to shoulder with Ahmadinejad, and he says, "One strike on Iran will be like an attack on Venezuela." I salute Hugo Chavez for standing up and supporting us. As I said, we need our friends outside of our faith as well as unity within. It's an old saying, but it holds very true. United we stand, divided we fall. Thank you very much for the reception here tonight. Thank you very much to my hosts, Jama'ate Islami, and I wish them the very best. Zindabad, Kerala Zindabad. Thank you.
ഇത്രയും മുസ്ലിം സംഘടനകളും വളരെയധികം ഇസ്ലാമിക പ്രസിദ്ധീകരണങ്ങളും ഒരുപാട് കൂട്ടായ്മകളും ഉണ്ടായിട്ടും എന്തുകൊണ്ട് ഒരു യുവൺ റിഡ്ലി കേരളത്തിൽ നിന്നുണ്ടാകുന്നില്ല എന്നുള്ളത് വളരെ പ്രസക്തമായ ചോദ്യമാണ്.
പോരാളികൾക്ക്, സാമ്രാജ്യത്വ വിരുദ്ധ പോരാട്ടത്തിന് നേതൃത്വം കൊടുക്കുന്നവർക്കും ആരംഗത്ത് അണിനിരന്നവർക്കും ഏറെ ആവേശവും പ്രചോദനവുമായി മാറിയ യുവോൺ റിഡ്ലിയുടെ സാന്നിധ്യത്തോടുകൂടിയുള്ള ഈ സമ്മേളനത്തിന് എല്ലാവിധ ആശംസകളും നേർന്നുകൊണ്ട് ഞാൻ എന്റെ വാക്കുകൾക്ക് വിരാമമിടുന്നു. നിങ്ങൾക്ക് വിപ്ലവാഭിവാദ്യങ്ങൾ.
ആരോ എവിടെ നടത്തിക്കൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്ന ഗൂഢാലോചനകളെ കുറിച്ചും ആരോ എവിടെ നടത്തിക്കൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്ന ചില കാട്ടിക്കൂട്ടലുകൾക്കും എതിരെ അതിനെക്കുറിച്ച് പറഞ്ഞും കരഞ്ഞും കൊണ്ട് മുന്നോട്ട് പോവുകയല്ല ഒരു സമുദായത്തിന്റെ ദൗത്യമെന്നും ഈ സമുദായത്തിന്റെ യഥാർത്ഥ ദൗത്യം തിരിച്ചറിഞ്ഞുകൊണ്ട് ഈ സമുദായത്തിന്റെ മധ്യത്തിലേക്ക് ഇറങ്ങി നിന്നുകൊണ്ട് ഇസ്ലാമിന്റെ ഏറ്റവും മാനുഷികമായ ഈ സന്ദേശത്തെ ഉയർത്തിപ്പിടിച്ചുകൊണ്ട് മുന്നോട്ട് പോകുവാനുള്ള കാലഘട്ടം തേടുന്ന ആർജവമാണ് മുസ്ലിം സമുദായം ഇന്ന് പ്രകടിപ്പിക്കേണ്ടത്. ഈ സമുദായത്തിന്റെ പേരിൽ ആരോപണങ്ങളെ അത് ചില രോദനങ്ങളായി, ചില പ്രസ്താവനകളായി, ചില ലേഖനങ്ങളായി മാത്രം അതിനെ പ്രതിരോധിച്ചുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കാതെ ഈ സമൂഹത്തിൽ ചെയ്യുവാനുള്ള പോസിറ്റീവായ ശ്രമങ്ങളിലൂടെ മുന്നോട്ട് പോകാൻ നമുക്ക് സാധിക്കേണ്ടതുണ്ട്. നിങ്ങളുടെ കുട്ടികളെ ഭീരുക്കളായി വളർത്താൻ പാടില്ല. പ്രസിദ്ധ മുസ്ലിം ചിന്തകനായ അലിജ അലി ഇസ്സത്ത് ബെഗോവിച്ച് അദ്ദേഹത്തിന്റെ പ്രശസ്തമായ ഒരു പുസ്തകത്തിൽ ഇക്കാര്യം സൂചിപ്പിക്കുന്നുണ്ട്. നിങ്ങളുടെ കുട്ടികളെ ഭീരുക്കളായി വളർത്താൻ ശ്രമിക്കരുത്. നിങ്ങളുടെ മക്കളെ നിങ്ങൾ ധീരന്മാരെ വളർത്തണം. വെയിൽ കൊണ്ടാൽ കരിഞ്ഞു പോകുന്ന, മഞ്ഞുകൊണ്ടാൽ പനിപിടക്കുന്ന പാവപ്പെട്ട LKG വിദ്യാർത്ഥികളുടെ സ്വഭാവം LKG വിദ്യാർത്ഥികളെ പോലെ നിങ്ങളുടെ വലിയ വിദ്യാർത്ഥികളെ യുവസമൂഹത്തെ നിങ്ങൾ വളർത്തരുത്. അവർക്ക് ജീവിതത്തിന്റെ ചൂട് അവരറിഞ്ഞുകൊണ്ട് മുന്നോട്ട് പോകണം. അവർക്ക് ഐസ്ക്രീമിന്റെ തണുപ്പ് മാത്രമല്ല, ഒരു ഐപോഡ് നൽകുന്ന സുഖാലസ്യം മാത്രമല്ല, ജീവിതത്തിന്റെ യാഥാർത്ഥ്യത്തെക്കുറിച്ചും ജീവിതത്തിന്റെ ഉശിരിനെ കുറിച്ചും ജീവിതത്തിന്റെ ചൂടിനെ കുറിച്ചും അറിഞ്ഞുകൊണ്ടുള്ള യഥാർത്ഥ മുന്നോട്ട് പോക്ക് തയ്യാറാക്കി കൊടുക്കുവാൻ ഇവിടുത്തെ അധ്യാപകർക്കും അതുപോലെ തന്നെ രക്ഷിതാക്കളുടെ സമൂഹത്തിനും സാധിക്കേണ്ടതുണ്ട്. ഇവിടുത്തെ പൊതുസമൂഹം ഏറ്റുപറയുന്ന അരാഷ്ട്രീയ മുദ്രാവാക്യങ്ങൾ അവരുടെ കാതിൽ ഓതിക്കൊടുത്ത് അവരുടെ മസിലുകളെ നിശൂന്യമാക്കിക്കൊണ്ട്, അവരുടെ ചിന്തയെ ഇല്ലാതാക്കിക്കൊണ്ട്, അവരുടെ ഭാവനയുടെ വിശാലതയെ ഇല്ലാതാക്കിക്കൊണ്ട് ഒരു സമൂഹത്തെ നിങ്ങൾക്ക് മുന്നോട്ട് കൊണ്ടുപോകാൻ സാധിക്കുകയില്ല. നമ്മിൽ നിന്ന് ഉയർന്നു വരേണ്ടത് ഈ ലോകത്തെ തന്നെ, ഈ ലോകത്തിന് പുതിയ ഭാവുകത്വം നിർമ്മിച്ചു നൽകുന്ന, ഈ ലോകത്തിന് പുതിയ രാഷ്ട്രീയത്തെ നിർമ്മിച്ചു നൽകാൻ കെൽപ്പുള്ള, ഈ ലോകത്തിന് പുതിയ വേഗവും പുതിയ ആവേശവും പുതിയ ലോകവും സൃഷ്ടിച്ചു നൽകാൻ സാധിക്കുന്ന ഒരു കാര്യക്ഷമമായ ഒരു തലമുറയെ സൃഷ്ടിക്കണമെന്നുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ രക്ഷിതാക്കളുടെയും പൊതുസമൂഹത്തിന്റെയും ഈ നിലപാട് മാറിയേ പറ്റൂ എന്ന് ആവർത്തിച്ച് പറയുവാൻ ഞാൻ ആഗ്രഹിക്കുകയാണ്. SIOവിനെ സംബന്ധിച്ചിടത്തോളം ഈ ഒരു പരിപാടിയിലൂടെ ആഗോള തലത്തിലുള്ള വിമോചന പോരാട്ടങ്ങളോട് കണ്ണിചേരുവാൻ SIOവിന് സാധിച്ചിട്ടുണ്ട്. നമ്മൾ റിഡ്ലിയെ കേരള സമൂഹത്തിൽ അവതരിപ്പിക്കുകയാണ് ലോകത്തെല്ലായിടത്തുമുള്ള മനുഷ്യാവകാശ പോരാട്ടങ്ങളോട് അഥവാ ഇസ്ലാമിക പോരാട്ടങ്ങളോട്, ലോകത്തെല്ലായിടത്തുമുള്ള നിസ്സഹായർക്ക് വേണ്ടിയുള്ള പരിശ്രമങ്ങളോട് അഥവാ ഇസ്ലാമിക പരിശ്രമങ്ങളോട്, ലോകത്തെല്ലായിടത്തും അനീതിക്ക് വേണ്ടി ശബ്ദിച്ചുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്ന മുന്നണി പോരാളികളോട് അഥവാ ഇസ്ലാമിന്റെ പോരാളികളോട് നമ്മൾ നമ്മുടെ ഐക്യദാർഢ്യം പ്രഖ്യാപിച്ചു കഴിഞ്ഞു എന്ന് സൂചിപ്പിക്കുവാൻ ഞാൻ ആഗ്രഹിക്കുകയാണ്.
യുവോൺ റിഡ്ലിക്ക് SIO കേരള സോണിന്റെ പേരിൽ എല്ലാവിധ അഭിവാദ്യങ്ങളും നന്ദിയും രേഖപ്പെടുത്തുകയാണ്.
രാജ്യങ്ങളിലേക്ക് നിരന്തരമായ യാത്രകൾ നടത്തിക്കൊണ്ട് ലോക മനുഷ്യാവകാശ പ്രസ്ഥാനങ്ങളുടെ വലിയ ആവേശമായി ഇന്ന് യുവോൺ റിഡ്ലി മാറിയിട്ടുണ്ട്. പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് മുസ്ലിം യുവാക്കൾക്കും ചെറുപ്പക്കാർക്കും വിദ്യാർത്ഥികൾക്കും ഇടയിൽ, ഇസ്ലാമിക പ്രസ്ഥാനങ്ങൾക്കിടയിൽ വലിയ ആവേശത്തിന്റെ ഒരു സോഴ്സായിട്ടാണ് യുവോൺ റിഡ്ലി ഇന്ന് കാണപ്പെടുന്നത്.
Islam and my brothers and sisters in the media, Assalamu alaikum. I'm very excited to be in here. It's my first trip, hopefully one of many to come. As you know, my story began publicly after the events of 9/11, when I ended up in Afghanistan reporting to the Sunday Express. During my time there, as a series of events, I ended up being arrested and detained by the Taliban for 10 days. In truth, I never thought I would survive beyond the first day. I had bought into all of the propaganda that this was the most evil, brutal regime in the world and they hated women. So I really didn't think I was going to see the sunset that night. What happened over the next 10 days was quite bizarre because I, as I said, thought that I would be executed. No doubt in my mind I would be executed. So on the grounds that you don't kiss the hand that slaps you, I decided that if I'm going to die, I'm going to go down fighting, and I became the prisoner from hell. I spat at them, I swore at them, I threw things at them, I wouldn't cooperate with them. And in return, they offered me nothing more than kindness. And they kept telling me, you are our sister, you are our guest. And I thought, what's wrong with these people? I know they're brutal and evil, so why are they trying to be nice? I'm not going to be fooled by this act. On the 6th day of my detention, I was visited by a cleric, and he offered me the chance to embrace Islam then and there. I told him that I couldn't make such a life-changing decision while I was in prison, but if he wanted to let me go, I promised that I would read the Quran and study Islam. It was a grasp at something, and within a couple of days after the war had begun, they released me while they held on to other Western prisoners. I was released on humanitarian grounds, and I often wondered whether it was the humanitarian grounds of the Taliban rather than me, because when I crossed over no man's land back into Pakistan, I don't know who had the biggest smile on their face, the Taliban or me. But when I got back to London, I started reading the Quran. And a few people asked me, why did you do that? And I said 2 reasons. One, I gave my word. Call me old-fashioned, but I think if you make a promise, then you should keep it. And secondly, as a journalist covering the Middle East and Asia, I thought that it was outrageous that I knew so little about a faith which is clearly a way of life for many people in that region. And so, how on earth could I write with any authority if I didn't know anything about Islam? And so I set about reading the Quran and reading supporting literature to try and learn a little bit more about Islam.
But of course in Afghanistan, there is a democratically elected government now. And at times,
which government are you talking about? There's 2 governments in Afghanistan. There's the Taliban government, which is running in the south, and of course there's Hamid Karzai, who's jokingly called the mayor of Kabul because he can't leave the capital. It's not safe for him to travel. You know, democracy in Afghanistan, it's a very loose term.
During your introduction, you said after embracing Islam, you came to know that Islam doesn't, the perception that Islam doesn't give freedom to women is a myth which needs to be explored. But how do you explain some of the practices in Islam, like women should wear clothes covering their body parts and even face? They should not expose themselves before men. How do you explain that?
Because I would rather sit here talking to you now and you talking to me on a mutual adult exchange. I would really rather not be sitting here showing off my cleavage and my legs and be judged on a totally different platform. What is more liberating than for me to sit here and talk to you and I'm being judged on my mind and character and not the size of my bust or the length of my skirt? Yeah?
Some would say this veil, or we in local vernacular call it the parda, gives them additional safety. How does it? Is it just a symbol of the acceptance of your faith that you wear this, or do you also feel more secure in this attire?
The hijab is part of my faith. There are at least 2 references in the Quran. It is an obligation to wear the hijab as a Muslim woman, but it is also part of my business suit. It tells you, when I go out on a morning, it tells you I am a Muslim woman. I demand to be treated with respect. Don't hit on me, don't offer me alcohol, don't give me a bacon sandwich. You want to talk to me, let's talk about something serious and not frivolous issues. It's a very powerful political symbol as well. For me, it represents liberation, and it's as part of my business suit as a Muslim woman. Now then, we're all very hot in here today. But if I turned round to the gentlemen and the ladies in the media and said, why don't you chill out and put on shorts and a t-shirt, you'd say, how dare you? This is part of my business suit. You're not going to take me seriously if I roll up for an interview and I'm sitting there in shorts and a t-shirt. In the same way, you wouldn't expect a Wall Street executive to dress in a casual manner when he's going about his business. So why people get so excited about the hijab, I'm not quite sure. But what is interesting is that Islamically, women are told to cover up. It's a very sort of loose term to wear a hijab and dress modestly. There are far, far many more rules governing the way Muslim men dress than women, and yet we never hear about that. Assalamu alaikum. I thought that I would tell you about my journey to Islam, from captive to convert, and then one of our sisters will also translate my story. And my story begins just after 9/11. The horrific events then. I was sent by my London newspaper to Pakistan to cover the build-up to the war which was about to happen in neighbouring Afghanistan. But I decided that the real story had to be inside Afghanistan, talking to real people about their hopes and fears. I don't want to talk to the politicians, I want to talk to ordinary people. And so I went to the Taliban embassy 3 times and tried to get a visa to go into Afghanistan. And 3 times they rejected me. And so with my 2 guides, I decided to sneak into Afghanistan wearing the all-covering blue burqa and try and talk to villagers belonging to one of my guides. The plan worked very well initially, and we got through no man's land and passed the Taliban checkpoint without anybody suspecting a thing. We then caught a taxi to the nearest city, which was Jalalabad, and I thought I would be able to observe life under the Taliban from beneath the burqa. And as we got out and walked towards the marketplace, I became quite nervous because I was going to find out just what life was like living under the Taliban, the most evil, brutal regime in the world, according to George Bush. And he wouldn't lie to us, would he? When we got into the marketplace, I was amazed. All the shopping was being done by men. And I thought, well, that's liberating, isn't it? But of course, in Afghanistan, a woman was unable to talk to a man other than her husband, her brother, or a close male relative. So doing something as simple as buying some flour or some sugar would be impossible unless you were related to the shop trader. My guides bought the shopping provisions, and we then went to visit one of their villages. And the village was about the size of this room. It was a very small village called Karma, just outside of Jalalabad. When we got there was much excitement because one of their own had returned and he was armed with lots of food. And the joy and excitement turned to fear when they said, "Who is this woman?" And they said, "She is a Western journalist. She wants to do a story." They said only that day that the Taliban spiritual leader, Mullah Omar, had said anyone helping a Westerner during this time of war would be executed. So you can imagine. And so they were naturally very concerned when they had a Westerner in their midst. But there's something wonderful about the Afghan people. They have a great hospitality, which is also matched by an overwhelming curiosity. And within half an hour, they began talking to me. And the first person to talk to me was a young woman. She was about 22. And I asked her about her hopes and fears about the impending war. And she said, "I'm so frustrated. I was training to be a doctor. And by now I should have qualified. And I should be in a hospital, ready to help my people." And I said, "Well, what happened?" And she said, "The school where I was training closed down." And I said, "Well, I heard that the Taliban did not like women to be educated. And so I'm very sad." And she said, "No, it wasn't that. The school ran out of money." And then her brother said, "This is right. I too was training to be a doctor at this medical school. And I was also sent home because there was no money." And I felt very sorry for these two young people who were clearly very bright, very ambitious. And there they were, sitting in this village, waiting for the start of this war. As I was talking to them, a larger-than-life lady walked in, and she looked me up and down very slowly, very deliberately, and she started tapping her foot, and her hands went on her hips, and I knew that this was a sign of trouble. And she said to me, "Tell me, do you have any children?" And I said, "Yes, I have a daughter." And she said, "Only one?" And I said, "Yes, one child." She said, "You English and American women, you are all so pathetic. All you can ever manage is one or maybe two children. Me, I can have 15. And when you run out of your boy soldiers, I will be producing more." And I thought, wow, this is real fighting talk. I thought that the Afghan woman was supposed to be quiet, shy and retiring. And this woman clearly wasn't. She was very opinionated. She knew what was happening around the world. And she said to me, "We're very sorry about what happened in 9/11. But what has it got to do with us?" And I thought about what she said. And I thought, she's right. Islam gives us this equality, and it gives us a justice that no other faith can compete with. We are very, very lucky, alhamdulillah. About 2 years after reading about Islam, the Prophet, peace be upon him, his companions, his wives, I converted to Islam, and I embraced what I say is the biggest and the best family in the world. And if I'll just finish this off now, I was lucky enough, shortly after I converted, to perform Hajj. And when I got back to London, my friends said, "What was the most moving thing for you when you went on Hajj? Was it seeing the Kaaba for the first time? Did you go to Medina? did you see the tomb of the Prophet, peace be upon him? I said I saw all those things, but the most moving moment for me happened when I was sitting in my hotel room and I heard the azan, the call to prayer, and I realized I was running very, very late. I grabbed my prayer mat and left the hotel on a little hilltop. I ran down the hill. I cut through the side streets. I jumped down the steps 2 or 3 at a time. I ran round the corner for the last dash to get into the mosque. And there in front of me was a whole sea of chaos. Tens and tens of thousands of other pilgrims were all trying to get into the mosque. We were all late for prayer. The scene was chaotic. People were pushing and shoving. We were just not going to get into the mosque in time. The sister to my left spoke in Urdu. I recognized the language, but I didn't know what she was saying. The brother to my right, he was speaking in a language I really couldn't understand. I still to this day don't know what language he was speaking. Total chaos, and then the first prayer began. And out of that sea of chaos, within 2 or 3 seconds, we had snapped into line. Regimental lines that any regimental sergeant major would have been proud of. It was incredible. Out of this total chaos came a unity, a discipline. I've never seen it in an army other than ours, Allah's army. And the prayers began. Suddenly, the brother to my right, the sister to my left, and me, we were as one. We could speak the same language. We knew what we were saying. Our prayers were in unison. And we were praying in the one direction to the one God. Hundreds and thousands of us outside the masjid, all praying in the one direction to the one God. Hundreds and thousands inside, also praying in the one direction to the one God. And I just thought, this is just a little of our big family, because they're all around the world now, all praying in this direction, all praying to the one God. And I just thought, if we could capture this unity and this discipline, not just 5 times a day, if we could practice it 24 hours, 7 days a week, imagine how strong and united we would be. And it is up to all of you, as mothers of the future, as mothers of today, to teach that message to the next generation of Muslims that are coming up, that our key word is unity, because in unity we will find strength. It's very true what they say, united we stand, divided we fall. So let's focus on what keeps us united. It's very simple. We are Muslims. We believe in the 5 pillars of Islam, and we fear no one but Allah. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope you've enjoyed listening to it as much as I've enjoyed sharing it with you. Thank you. Salam alaikum.
بسم الله الرحمن والذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات لا نكلف نفسا إلا وسعها أولئك أصحاب الجنة هم فيها خالدون.
പിന്നീട് 3 മാസത്തിന് ശേഷം അവർ താലിബാന്റെ തടവറയിൽ നിന്ന് പുറത്തുവരികയും ലണ്ടനിൽ തിരിച്ചെത്തുകയും താലിബാൻ തടവറയിലെ അനുഭവങ്ങൾ മുന്നിൽ വെച്ചുകൊണ്ട് അവർ ഇസ്ലാമിനെ കുറിച്ച് പഠിക്കുകയും പരസ്യമായി ഇസ്ലാം സ്വീകരിക്കുകയുമാണ് ചെയ്തത്.
That characterized the Islamic system of life. Kerala is one of the most advanced states in India in education and social awareness. Jama'ate in the state is also one of the most proactive and dynamic branches of Jama'ate with its conscious effort ever since its inception in the state.
At the moment I was captured, I really didn't think that I would see the sunset that evening. I had bought into all of the Western propaganda that the Taliban is the most evil, brutal regime in the world and they hate women. So you can imagine what was going through my mind when I was arrested. I really thought that they would kill me. They would probably torture me first, probably burn me and do all sorts of things. Stuff that we read about later in Abu Ghraib, in Bagram and in Guantanamo Bay.
Sister Ridley, Assalamu alaikum. And Assalamu alaikum to all my brothers and sisters. We got some approximate idea about her experience in Afghanistan under the custody of Taliban. Coming to the question, it has been assumed that Taliban was a fanatic group, and according to my assumption or assessment, with their deeds, they are still a fanatic group only, because they are the group who destroyed the Bahamian statues, who hanged the Najimullah, who had ruled Afghanistan once upon a time, hanged in such a way that he has been hanged on a light post, electric post, and these type of acts resembles an uncivilized group or criminal thugs, and this impression is very much existing in my mind. How this my impression can be removed? Can Sister Ridley make any comments? My name is Abdul Rahman.
When the British Army was in occupation in Kabul about 150 years ago, one of the officers there ordered that about 20 Afghan leaders be strung up and hung from the lamppost. Maybe the Taliban got the idea from the British. I don't know. The Bahamian statues, I always said that was nothing more than cultural vandalism. It was an outrage. And I did ask them when I felt a bit more confident during my captivity, why did you destroy those statues? And they explained it. I wouldn't say it was a justification, but what they said was that the entire world had ostracized them, with the exception of 2 or 3 countries. Nobody was speaking to them, and nobody was giving aid. The country was in the grip of famine and drought, and of course the legacy of 2 decades of fighting. And people were starving to such an extent that they were eating grass. It was a terrible situation. And one of the commanders had said those statues are an affront to Islam and we should blow them up. Suddenly, they said the whole world wanted to talk to them. From right around the world, ambassadors, diplomats, archaeologists, academics came flooding to Afghanistan, to the various embassies, Afghan embassies, and they desperately pleaded with them not to blow up the Buddhas. And one of the Taliban who helped me, he said they virtually trod over the bodies of our starving people to beg for mercy for these piles of rock. And they were ignoring the human tragedy that was unfolding in our country, so we blew up the statues. It was a petulant thing to do. It was the act of a very immature government, and they, bearing in mind the government as it was under the Taliban, they were all in their late 30s, early 40s. It was also the most disabled government in the world. They had arms and legs and eyes missing from previous conflicts. And that is what they told me why they blew up the statues. As I say, no justification. It was cultural vandalism. But it is interesting that the plight of millions of starving Afghans went unnoticed at that point. And, maybe that's again a very sad reflection on the world today. And I often feel that had the world come round and embraced the Taliban and given them support and help and aid, then they might have gone from the outer fringes to a more mainstream government that was more equipped and able to deal with 2 decades of famine, drought and war. And I think that it also would be much cheaper in the long run if the Afghans had been bombarded with aid instead of the artillery that they're facing at the moment. And there hasn't been a single army that has succeeded in Afghanistan. If we could bring Alexander the Great here today, he would say, do not go into that country, you can't win. The Mongol hordes were given a good hiding by the Afghans. 3 different British armies in 3 different campaigns have been kicked out of Afghanistan with devastating consequences. The Russian Empire, the back of the Russian Empire was probably broken by these ruddy little gunmen with their flip-flops and Kalashnikovs. So, and what's interesting now is some of the Taliban are in the Karzai government. Some of the old Taliban are out and have withdrawn their support from the Americans and the British. It's not black and white in Afghanistan. It's a very complex situation. But my advice would be for the armies to pull out and for the aid workers to go in.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm a doctor practicing here in Cochin. I want to ask you, I'm very happy to see how much respect you give to the Prophet ﷺ. And I think you have made a mention of this at least 4 or 5 times during your talk, even today. So how close are you to Holy Quran? How often do you read? Do you know how to read Arabic Quran? And
I haven't mastered the Arabic language, but what I did do, I took a shortcut and I married an Arab who reads the Quran to me. I try every day to at least read a verse or two verses or do something, read something that will help me. Like all Muslims, I'll take 2 or 3 steps forward, another day will be 2 or 3 steps back. Every day is a challenge, and I do have a great love. It's 6-7 years ago I'd never heard of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Now I would give my last drop of blood for his honour to defend his faith. As I said before, I was a practicing Christian, and I remember, I was a Protestant, but I remember going to the Vatican, the home of the Roman Catholic Church, and there were little statues of the Virgin Mary in snow globes, statues of Jesus in snow globes being sold for $1 or $2 as trinkets, and when the whole thing blew up over the cartoons in Denmark, I went on a radio show with a Roman Catholic priest, and he said, "Oh, you Muslims, you've gone over the top, you take things far too seriously, you're taking a sledgehammer to crack a nut." And I said, "You have got absolutely no right to talk. You sell Jesus in a snow globe, along with the Virgin Mary. What sort of respect have you got? Don't come and tell me about respect, when you do that to Jesus and Mary," I said, which, by the way, we would never do in Islam because we respect them more than you do. And he was quite taken aback by this.
I'm delighted to be in India. This is my first visit, and I've had a wonderful reception so far. One of the things that I've come over to talk about is Islamophobia, which is rife in Britain, but it is also in evidence elsewhere across the world. And one of the main sources of Islamophobia is the media, and I'll be appealing to the media to have a greater understanding of Islam and don't allow governments and politicians and establishment figures to whip up fear and hysteria about Islam or Muslims. Every time a politician somewhere in the world stands up and demonizes Islam, what usually happens on the street is that a sister gets attacked verbally or even physically by some racist yob. And that is the reality. So what I'm urging the media to do, fellow journalists to do, is to write about Islam with some understanding and some thoughtfulness, and not allow yourselves to be whipped up in this hysteria as well. One of the biggest misconceptions in Islam is towards women, and this is something else that I am hoping to rectify during my trip to India.
During a sitting with SIO brothers in their office this morning, she mentioned that she has been inspired by the activities and by the people and brothers and sisters she met during her maiden visit to Kerala, to our part.
The Respect Party is the only political party in Britain today which is 100% behind the Palestinian people. I was shocked yesterday to read a statement given by the British Foreign Secretary David Miliband when he was asked about the events in Gaza. He said that the Palestinians have got to stop attacking Israel.